Mike Ham joins us this morning on our Greetings from the Garden State segment. And Mike, you found a really cool band this week for your podcast.
That's right. I sure did. So last year, I remember we went to a show at the Asbury Hotel on the rooftop, the Baronet rooftop, I think it's called. We knew two of the opening bands, Jackson Pines and the Vaughns. They actually played Jersey Fest this past May. They were the opening acts for this band, Connor Bracken and the Mother Leeds Band, and we stayed for the whole show because the whole show was great. But we're totally blown away by Connor and his band. It was unbelievable. Like they were so good, so engaging, so they just rocked. And it was a lot of fun. And then, that kind of developed a little bit of a friendship between Connor and I. And we've kind of been talking about doing an episode now for pretty much since that show. So almost like a year later, we finally got it on the books. And they're great.
One of the things that I've noticed with their music is they don't sound like anybody else. It's a fresh, original sound.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we talked a lot about that because Connor talked about growing up in like the New Brunswick area and like the Court Tavern playing shows when he was like 13 years old or 14 years old there, and how he bought his first guitar and just like joined a band. He had no idea how to play a guitar, so he's kind of been developing it since he was a kid. And he talked about how really like their albums and all that kind of stuff, they're recorded kind of like in like a day, most of the time. Like they're playing it in a sense like live because that he just likes the energy, he likes the, being around his bandmates, all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't up until recently, like COVID and all that, where they actually had to, record separately and everything. So I think that certainly adds to kind of the sound that you hear on the recorded albums. But obviously they have a bunch of live albums up on Spotify and wherever you would listen to music on there.
Over the past few months, you've brought us a number of bands from New Jersey to the show. And I keep thinking that there's probably a really cool indie scene going on that's very reminiscent of maybe mid to late 60s or early 70s here in New Jersey. It's very encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like we over the last couple of months, I probably like you and I have probably talked about three, four, five bands maybe. I know Connor, obviously, the Azures. There's definitely a couple of Natalie Farrell. I know there's a couple others, but just like understanding kind of what's happening in the music scene and how it's evolved from, what people call like the heyday of Jersey, music. And we actually just did a live show yesterday with Emily Borneman from Dentist, which is a big band in the Asbury Park area. And we were talking about like the Jersey sound. And I talked about us, you and me, talking about like what is the Jersey sound? Like what does that sound like? And there's really you can't really put your finger on it. But there's definitely kind of a groundswell of talent and people that are really hungry for getting their stuff out there in front of people and playing shows and putting out records and all that.
Artists who are successful on a level of, say, Bruce Springsteen, to keep it Jersey centric, they are very, very few and far between. But in listening to your interview with Connor, what I got out of it is if you put a little bit of elbow grease into it, you can be relatively successful, not
Yeah.
maybe mega superstar. And you have to make sure that you've got a number of bases covered. But, between live shows and merchandise and recordings, you can make a living at some point doing this.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing too, and what we talked about off of that point, is the fact that like the band that he has now, like the lineup that he has now, they're all in the same boat. Like the people that he surrounds himself with. Like obviously, it's Connor Bracken and the Mother Leeds Band, so he obviously has a certain role in the band itself. But when you're surrounding yourself with people that are hungry like you, that want to see the band succeed, that are, like I think he used the reference, if you need to convince somebody to get in the van, you already lost kind of thing. And these are people that just they'll go play wherever, they'll do whatever, like you said, whatever it takes to make it work, because they love it, And I think there's a lot you and I or anybody really can talk about like the business of music nowadays and how it's evolved also because of social media and different things like that. But it always comes back to like the core. Can you put on a good show? Can you put butts in the seats? And are you a fun band to listen to?
I think of something that Steve Van Zandt from the E Street Band said on February 8th, 1964. Nobody was in a band.
Yeah,
February 9th, 1964, the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan.
that's right.
February 10th of 1964, everybody was in a
Yeah.
band.
Yeah. And it's crazy too. Like Connor talked about how like he always knew, even before he knew how to play music, that he wanted to be in a band. He didn't know how he was going to do it. He didn't know what that was going to look like, but he wanted to be in a band. So he bought a guitar and started a band. And started playing in garages and basements and all that kind of stuff. So if you, it's the here you go, the Field of Dreams thing. If you build it and you put it together, obviously, like you said, elbow grease, there's a lot of work that goes into it, but if you put it out there, people will listen.
And they even have their own beer. That's
Yes,
pretty
they do.
cool.
Yeah, I am honestly, admittedly, extremely jealous because I want my own beer. But they did a collaboration with Twin Lights Brewing, which I believe is in Tinton Falls. It's the Mother Leeds Irish Red Ale, and they did that as a partnership with Twin Lights. And the band, and it goes back to a charity in the Asbury Park area that basically helps kids buy instruments. So like part of the proceeds that they make from the beer goes back to that, which I think is just an awesome cause, and it was really cool. And the beer is excellent. I had at least one during the recording. I can't tell you how many I had after the recording, though.
And it is very important that we support local youth by funding musical instruments because, as you and I have spoken about before, when there are cuts in school budgets, a lot of times it's arts that go first.
Yeah.
So you have, folks like Connor Bracken and the Mother Leeds Band doing this. Steve Van Zandt has a program. There's a Pat Denizio scholarship for the late frontman for the Smithereens. So very, very important stuff. You can check it all out on greetingsfromthegardenstate.com. Connor Bracken and the Mother Leeds Band. Thanks, Mike Ham.
Thanks, Jim.